while the AFL is working through what they're going to do with Tuke Miller and Dane Zorko, particularly Tuke Miller, they're still to work through what Port Adelaide is going to get by way of a sanction for this clash of last week. We've all seen it now where Aliir and Lachie Jones come together. Lachie Jones subbed out, initially diagnosed with a migraine, although it was clearly a concussion. And Aliir, both players now have, subsequent to that moment, Aliir coming back on after 6 minutes, now been put under concussion protocols. They'll both miss this week's match against the Geelong Footy Club. But the falling on the sword by the Port Adelaide Football Club, I believe it will mitigate the sanction that will come. And while I called for a couple of $100,000 sanction, Lordy, on Monday night on this show, I believe it'll be less than that and could well be less than $100,000. But it will be a significant impost.
If I can ask a producer upstairs, Jack Cannon, to roll the tape that we just saw of that collision. I just want to point something out because there was a situation where it's very hard to see from the bench. OK, so you see the collision. The mitigating circumstances for the Port Adelaide doctor is the fact that two of them were down and out. What is going to happen, though, is that the ARC, as well as doing the score review, has a dedicated doctor watching and to spot these situations, to call to the doctor on the bench and say, you need to have a look. Now, what happened, of course, here was Aliir presented as if he wasn't too bad. They didn't do the testing. That's been admitted to. That'll be sorted out. But what I can tell exclusively tonight is the AFL are now looking for the doctor who was at the ARC to have more of a say in these situations. To say, not only has there been a collision there, no, we've seen it. Aliir's caught one in the head. Did you see that? Do the full protocol. And that's going to come in more. The doctors, the clubs have fought against the overruling from a doctor sitting in a bunker rather than being on the spot. I think we're going to see that this is going to have a far greater impetus.
That will help, won't it? It'll help take the pressure off the doctor against the coach, maybe, who's asking, can you get
the independent doctor assessment, though, Ed, that's the next step. And I believe this incident will absolutely hasten that to that point, as well as the ARC. Look, it's come at the most inopportune time for the whole competition, given that a federal parliamentary Senate inquiry is about a month away from having its findings released. This issue last week through the Victorian system with Shane Tuck's issues. We also had a Melbourne footballer in Taylor Harris who decided 6 weeks before the first AFL game of the season enter a boxing ring, where every endeavour in the AFL system is to minimise head contact, and if there is to be head contact in any form on the AFL field, there's going to be sanctions applied, and then you've got an athlete, a supreme athlete, a superior athlete in the competition entering a bout where head knocks are part of the game.
So what happens with Taylor there? Because in boxing, if you get knocked out, you can't fight or train for a month.
For a month, yeah.
So I'd imagine that would move into
Do you think we get to a point where if you sign an AFL contract or an AFLW contract, you cannot box?
I believe we're heading there.
Surely, do we get to that point?
I believe we're heading there. I don't want to knock someone who's an elite athlete at two sports and is trying to also earn money, which she at the moment feels, along with other AFLW players, is not sufficient enough under their playing contracts to play the game of football. But it's just something very uncomfortable watching.
Look, it's always hard when you're coming out of football and there's all this money now. We saw Cam Mooney fighting and getting knocked out recently. We know Shane Tuck in one of the most clinical knockouts I've ever seen in a ring. It's all very well being a good footballer, boxer, but you get in, people who know how to box, it's another level above. It's like being a good local tennis player. You get in with somebody who can really play. It's a different game. And it is going to be really hard, I think, down the track to prove some of these concussion cases if they're taken as one after the other. That's why the AFL, who came up with a no-fault proposal, which hasn't been implemented but should be implemented, so that people who've got legitimate claims can be looked after. And also that these particular individuals, they're going to get left with a big legal bill if they're not careful, and maybe not a great result. So again, we have to be super empathetic. We have to look after our people and be really fair in this and make sure that we get the right people, the right compensation.
To Lloydie's question about the boxing ban, I mean, they have now banned even spar sessions within clubs after that incident at Hawthorn a couple of years ago where the player was knocked out.
It's interesting. Last week I broke the story here on this show that Ben King had been going to boxing training to try and sharpen up a bit. Nothing wrong with boxing training as long as you're not getting cleaned up. That's the main thing. More happens in the training gym than happens in the ring in boxing for anyone who's been around the world of pugilists.